Welcome back to ChristianLivingRadio.com. You are now listening to Unashamed by Grace with Joann Pelcher and Stacey Cormier. We're going to have a discussion today on sexual addictions and the embarrassment it causes and whatever else they want to bring to the table. Good morning, good afternoon. How are you ladies doing?
Good morning.
Awesome. Thank you for having us. Yeah, Stacey, we were talking, and she just really has a heart for children and, of course, for her children. So she kind of titled this A Mom's Perspective, and talking with your kids, having that open communication. So I was so glad she could join us today to give her side of and her perception of, just raising two or actually three boys, raising boys, and, some of the things that she's seen. So I'm really excited to have her here today.
Yeah, I'm glad
Boys
to be
are
here.
tricky.
They are, but not as tricky as
Those
girls, from what
yeah.
I hear.
Yeah.
We wouldn't know. We have all boys.
Oh, I know. I was tricky growing up.
I raised two girls. So,
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah. So.
Well, go ahead. Let's hear what you have today, because it's been a very educational ride. Last week we did Living in the Digital Age.
Yes.
And that was pretty awesome.
Tricky, yeah.
So
Definitely.
I'm excited to hear what you have today.
Okay.
Well, and this kind of piggybacks on that a little bit too, because of the fact that a lot of our children are seeing things now on the computer and the internet and their phones, just like we were talking about before, because, our kids and our teens now, they're facing issues that we as adults never had to. When we were growing up, if we wanted to find something, it was pretty hard to get our hands on it, right? We'd have to go to the store, or you'd have to have someone steal it for you, or, you'd find it at a best friend's house under their dad's bed. And it's not like that anymore. So this does piggyback on the last show, because that's where they're seeing it is in this digital age, is on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's very readily available.
Yes.
To all ages, too.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Type in the wrong word.
Yeah.
You find
well,
out.
you're not even. You can type in legitimate stuff and.
Yeah, did you actually know the most or the word that's searched for the most used for pornography is love? If you type in love,
that's sad.
Yep, that is the highest word that's searched for pornography, and which is the exact opposite of what it is.
Well, but people are looking for that. Understand? I mean, that says something huge about what people are looking for.
Yeah.
And what the world has given them.
They
back.
have love
It's
really
not
twisted.
love. Yeah.
Yes.
Perverted. Totally perverted.
We'll talk about that. That'll be another show, but
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So yeah, Stacey, what do you want to say? What's on your heart today?
I just, when you asked me kind of to join this, really my heart is just communication, I guess, with our kids, because I have a teenager, we have a boy that's 25, a 17, and an 8. So I was not raised in a Christian home, and I did not really have open and honest communication with my parents. I'm sure that was a factor there. I don't think that's the whole reason. I think that a lot of times as parents, we avoid topics that we don't know how to talk about. Maybe it wasn't modeled for us, or we just don't have enough education to talk about it, so we avoid it. So
I agree. Yeah, because nowadays, or well, even back then, but a lot of times the kids are talking about it together, and the parents or adults may talk about it at dinner parties, but we're not talking about it together with adults and children. That we're talking about it separately. So Unashamed by Grace wants to bridge that gap, and that's one of the reasons why we have Stacey here, to learn how we can talk to our children and bridge that gap between, so we can open those lines of communication with them.
I was going to say something that you said is, or they Google it. I mean, it's important to understand when you said your opening comment about the most searched thing. You want your children to come to you and ask you questions because you want to be able to frame the response and give them a godly response, or direct them to other godly people that can respond if they're not comfortable coming to you. And I want them to come to me to ask me those questions. I don't want them to go to their friends and get misinformation, and I don't want them to Google it, because Lord knows what they'll get.
Yeah.
When they pull that up, and that's what we tell them to do repeatedly when they want to know something. When my kids ask me something, what's this do, or what's this do? I don't know, Google it. That's a very common thing that we do.
Yeah, it is.
And to think how they could just translate that over into
Absolutely.
from a very serious conversation that we should be having with them, and their first thought may be, I'll just Google it. rather than coming to your, not that
everything's
we're
on
doing that on
Google.
purpose, but that's kind of where we're headed. Yeah.
Right. And they take that as the truth.
Yeah.
A
it's
lot
true.
of times. And they learn enough from their friends.
Right. Well, and I think in one of the other shows I gave statistics on this, but that's actually how children nowadays, children and teens, find out about sexual education, because they're not getting it home. So that's how they get that missing piece of information that they may have heard things, on the playground, or heard things here and there, or seen things in movies, but it may not all the puzzles fit together. Sure. So then they Google it, they go to find it, and they look at pornography as a way to kind of fill in all the missing pieces. Which obviously, that's just going down the wrong road, and it's just going to actually create something that has to be fixed later. So, by teaching them at home early, we can hopefully give them a good foundation so they don't have to go and search for those things. Because if they know the truth and they're taught the truth early, then hopefully that will really help make a difference as they get older, where they're not searching for what, a lot of them think is truth somewhere else.
Yeah, it's good. We just, I wanted to say this in relation to what you talked about the opening the conversation about pornography and sex and that with your kids. I think that just like anything that we do, we have to have that foundation of trust with them first. Yes. About anything that we talk about with them. And then maybe that will kind of eliminate that awkwardness of talking to them about pornography and those things. And I know I didn't come from a home where that was talked about with me. And I don't think it's because it wasn't as prevalent or it wasn't a problem back then. I think it definitely was a problem back then. It wasn't as accessible as you mentioned, but my parents didn't take the opportunity to talk to me about that. And I'm sure it's because their parents didn't. So I guess that what I would encourage people to, that if you don't know how to talk about it, just like you would research anything, you don't go get a home loan without researching it, or you don't go invest without researching it. If you want to talk to your kids about something like that, find a group like Unashamed by Grace, or find a resource that you can go to that helps you start the conversation like you're talking about. And
properly educate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Properly educate.
Instead of not doing it at all.
Yeah.
know.
Well, what I don't want to take away from what you wanted to say. I don't know what you have there, but when do you think is the best time? When did you start talking to your children about pornography?
Well, that's different for all of our kids. I hate to say the first one's a guinea pig, but they are. And our older boy, I don't think we properly dealt with it. When it came about, they didn't have smartphones yet. So this was, we're talking 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
Still had access in some degree on the computer and other media, but they didn't, the smartphones hadn't come out yet. So when we saw that come across, in fact, he had a friend that sent him an email with something in it. He obviously opened it and loaded something on our computer. We didn't know this had happened, and we were all in our office one day. So I've got him, a younger boy, Travis, and myself, in the office cleaning one day, and I look at the computer. And it had changed the screensaver. We used to have these nice family photos.
Right.
When it used to change your screensaver.
Yes.
It was not family friendly anymore.
I was like, so we ran over, shut it off. And I'm like, okay, it's obviously not from me. So we need to find out where this is from. And it come to find out it was something embedded in that he had opened up. And, I remember briefly talking to him about it. Travis probably more so addressed it. But we didn't really know how to deal with that other than kind of cutting off that friendship with that kid. There were some other things involved there, but we're like, listen, if X, Y, and Z is going on and he's sending you these things, this is not the kind of friend that that you should be around, right? So I think we dealt with it to some extent, but we did not know how to educate him. And at that time, there were struggles that I didn't know about going on in the home, and my husband probably didn't, he didn't know how to educate him. So we just didn't do the best job with him. Now, when the middle boy was raised, we started this, a couple of years ago. What do you think? That was 3 years ago when we started talking to them?
I would say so.
Yeah.
Yes.
We just had made a decision, smartphones were out and the stuff was out, and we're like, we can't avoid it this time. Not that we were trying to avoid it the first time. We didn't know how to talk about it.
Right.
So
neither did I.
Yeah. So now what we opted to do with him was be a little more proactive. We had Joann and I and a couple, maybe 4 other families, all folks from our church, all godly men they all had boys. We all had boys the same age. Just happened to be, and what we did is we kind of went through the book, Every Man's Battle. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but
Never.
It's really about these two guys, one of them a pastor, I think.
Yes.
Or if not both, dealing with their sexual addiction as they went through childhood into college years and onward, and how they dealt with it and how to talk to your kids about it. So what we opted to do was get them together. We bought them all the book, and they just went through the book every week, read a chapter, got together, talked about it, allowed the boys to ask questions anonymously, gave them Post-it notes and allowed them, if they were embarrassed, to ask questions anonymously. And the gentlemen gave their testimonies and kind of talked about it. So I think we kind of opened, ripped off the Band-Aid at that point and said, we've got to do something. We got to talk about it. And that was kind of our guide for that, was to kind of talk about how can you talk to your kids about things that are very, very private and personal,
right,
and sexual, those carnal things.
Yes.
And our boys were maybe 14,
at
around
least
there,
14, 15,
and all of them had seen stuff already. So at 14, it was nothing new what was being discussed.
Yeah.
It's just we were turning it in a different direction to where we were teaching purity and the correct response to those things, and also what's the godly, biblical definition of sexuality from the Bible. But they had all seen stuff and heard things before. So that kind of brings us, what she had said at the beginning, where I asked her, when do you start the conversation? And she had said that depends on each child, but which I totally agree. And the short answer of that is, you look at it, of course, as a family, but it's earlier than you think.
You are listening to Unashamed by Grace with Joann Pelcher and Stacey Cormier. Living in a digital age, we must cover our children better to protect them from the targeting of the porn industry by opening better lines of communication through love and discussion. Let's rejoin Stacey and Joann as they further this discussion and educate us better. You're listening to ChristianLivingRadio.com.
Earlier than you think.
Yeah, it's much earlier than it used to be.
Well, if you ask my 8-year-old, we've already talked to him, because the fact is, you've talked to folks that have, called in for help that have children or like 10
5.
and 12.
Well, there's been a 5-year-old already.
What?
You couldn't imagine in your wildest imagination when that you first saw the stuff that they're talking about now every day as normal. You just, you're at an age, I'm thinking, I didn't know XYZ until I was 18, or I didn't understand that I was under a rock.
You're learning stuff now.
We were sheltered.
Not that I lived under a rock, but it was just that
it was much different back then, yes.
Rolling downhill. And to now I think I have to talk to my 8-year-old about,
I know.
And I'm obviously, the level of information is different, but he can tell you don't have sex until after you're married, and we kind of tell him what the right order is. And are we brainwashing him? Yeah, I want that to come up. If he ever gets in that circumstance, I want that to come up out of him and say, that's not the godly way to do it. This is, I need to take pause and
well, a lot of kids don't have that truth already inside of them, and because of the awkwardness, and I don't blame the parents at all. I mean, it's very hard to discuss. I had my friend Kelly, her son, I think he's a senior at MIT now, but he was, maybe 4 or 5 years older than my son. And I remember when Clayton was about 8 years old, she was telling me how she had just started to have discussion with her son. And I remember feeling sick because I thought, I'm going to have to start doing that with my son. And it got to the point where it became, the more you do it, it's awkward at first. In the beginning, but if you start to make it a regular discussion, just like with anything, it becomes easier. But and this was just the way our family did it, but we kind of eased into it, telling him about things. And when I would pick him up from school, we might talk, because the key is when you are talking to your children, you stay on point and you keep it brief. Because if you drag it out and you make it a long conversation, they space it out or they'll shut you down. I would tell him, and
they're good at
about anything.
So I would start talking, and he'd put his hands over his ears. Oh, Mom, do we have to talk about sex again? And so he would say to me, he would make a deal and he'd say, all right, I'll let you talk to me for 5 minutes if I get an extra half hour of playing my video games tonight after I do my homework. And I said, okay.